The lights were too bright that night. Cameras blinked in steady rhythm, like 1,000 unblinking eyes waiting for him to speak. Kang sat beneath the glare, the warmth of the spotlight cutting through the chill in his chest. His fingers trembled slightly as he adjusted the microphone. Soft hum echoing through the silent studio. When he finally raised his eyes, the crowd of reporters leaned forward, expectant, hungry, unaware that what they were about to hear would rewrite everything they thought they knew about him. "I've hidden her for years," he began quietly. His voice cracked in the first word. "Yoo-jung. I thought I was protecting her." The room froze. A single breath escaped somewhere in the back row, followed by complete stillness. There were no gasps, no whispers. Only the sound of his heartbeat pounding through the speakers. He looked up, eyes glistening under the lights, and for a moment, the carefully constructed walls of celebrity vanished. What stood there wasn't an actor, but a man breaking apart in front of the world. He didn't cry for pity, he cried for the years he could never get back. It had been nearly a decade since he first met Kim Yoo-jung. They were both young then, bright, unguarded, still believing that kindness could survive fame. On screen, their chemistry was effortless, a quiet harmony that drew audiences in without a single word. Off-screen, it was something even simpler, two people who understood each other's silence. They laughed between takes, shared long conversations that stretched into dawn, and learned to carry each other's loneliness like a secret gift. But in the world they lived in, truth was dangerous. Rumors could destroy. Affection could be weaponized. The brighter the spotlight, the darker the shadow it cast. Kang learned early that love, in his world, came with a price tag. When the company executives warned him, "You can't be seen together. You'll ruin her. You'll ruin yourself," he nodded, pretending to agree. But the words carved deep into his heart. So he built walls. Every smile became measured, every gesture rehearsed. The public saw perfection, no one saw the weight behind it. Fame became a cage. He would later say, beautiful, glittering, and suffocating. He began to disappear into the version of himself people wanted him to be. The charming star, the flawless image, the man who had everything. But every time he stood under the lights, he thought of her, of the laughter they once shared in the quiet corners of a set, of the way she always said his name softly, like she was afraid the world might overhear. As his fame grew, the distance between them widened. They stopped calling. They stopped writing. And yet, in moments of weakness, on the plane between shoots, alone in hotel rooms, before another forced smile, he would whisper her name under his breath, as though saying it could somehow keep her close. Years passed. One drama after another. Awards, applause, magazine covers. But the applause that once felt like love began to sound hollow. The faces cheering for him became a blur. He was everywhere, and nowhere at once. The nights stretched long, with quiet guilt and the echo of things left unsaid. He learned to carry silence like armor, convincing himself that hiding her was an act of protection. If the world never knows, he told himself, then she'll be safe. But safety came at a cost. In protecting her, he had erased himself. Every interview where he was asked about love became a test of restraint. "Do you have someone special?" they'd ask. He would smile that perfect, empty smile and say, "I'm focusing on work." Every lie felt like another small betrayal, of her, of himself, of the truth that once kept him alive. Times he'd catch glimpses of her on television, smiling beneath the lights, radiant and calm. She had learned the same art of survival. And he wondered if she ever thought of him when the cameras stopped rolling. Once, during an awards show, their eyes met across the stage, just for a second. The crowd roared around them. But in that single glance, it felt like time had stopped. There was no fame, no fear, no distance, just two souls who once shared something the world would never understand. Then she looked away, and the moment was gone. He kept her letters, though she never knew it. Simple things, thank you notes, scribbled post-its, a small photo from their first set together. Sleepless nights. He'd take them out, tracing the edges with his fingertips as though they could anchor him to something real. He once wrote a letter in return. He never sent, "If I ever say your name in public, it means I'm ready to lose everything." At night, under the harsh lights of the studio, finally said it. The confession wasn't planned. There was no script. No PR team nodding from the sidelines. It came from exhaustion. From the slow collapse of a man who had cared too much for too long. He looked up at the cameras. The thousands of unseen faces watching through screens. And he let the truth out. His tears fell quietly, rolling down his face like the years he'd kept locked inside. Every time I lied about her, said, voice shaking, I felt like I was dying a little more. I thought silence could protect her. It only made the pain worse. I hid her not because I didn't love her, but because I loved her too much. Words hung in the air, heavy and raw. Even the reporters, trained to chase headlines, couldn't speak. One of them later said, it didn't feel like a confession. Like grief. Behind the cameras, someone wiped their eyes. Another lowered the lens. Unable to keep filming. There was something sacred in that silence. Something too human to interrupt. He sat there for a long time after it ended, staring at the floor. The lights dimming slowly above him. Outside, the night air was cool. The city hummed, unaware that a man had just laid his heart bare for the world to see. When he finally stepped out into the darkness, he looked up at the stars, those distant lights that never blinked, never faltered, never wept. The first time in years, he didn't feel like one of them. He felt like himself again. What no one knew then was that his confession was only the beginning. The truth had been spoken. But the story behind it, the fear, the reasons, the years of silence, was still waiting to be told. And when it came, it would break everyone who thought love was supposed to be easy. The morning after the confession, the city awoke to silence. No headlines screamed. Breaking news banners flared across the screen. For once, even the media didn't know what to say. It wasn't a scandal, it was sorrow. The kind that seeps through words and lingers between breaths. Clips of Song Kang's trembling voice flooded the internet overnight. And millions replayed the moment he whispered Kim Yoo-jung's name. Each time, it felt heavier. Each time, it hurt more. At the studio, staff members who had worked with him for years said they had never seen him like that, unguarded. Small, almost fragile. Stayed behind after everyone left. Sitting alone under the lights long after they dimmed. The microphone still stood in front of him. Silent witness to everything he had carried and finally released. When a producer quietly asked you if he was okay, he smiled faintly and said, I think this is the first time I can breathe. For years, Song Kang had lived by one rule, never let anyone know who matters most. It wasn't just a company's warning, it was the reality of their world. In the industry, love wasn't romantic, it was reckless. Emotion was measured. Every gesture monitored. But he loved her anyway. The only way he could, quietly. He hid her from the world because he believed that was the only way to keep her safe. He once said to a friend, "It doesn't destroy love. It just makes you choose which parts of it you're allowed to show," and for him, the choice was silence. Silence has a way of becoming its own kind of cruelty. The longer he hid, the heavier it grew. Watched from afar as she built her own path, as rumors swirled, as strangers paired her name with others. Time he wanted to speak. Something stopped him, fear, contracts. Unspoken rule that love was bad business. Yet love, when buried, doesn't die. It waits. It waits until it hurts too much to stay hidden. The confession came not from guilt, but from exhaustion. Years of pretending had hollowed him out. He had learned to smile without meaning it, to answer without thinking, to live without feeling. The night before the interview, he couldn't sleep. He turned on a rerun of the first drama they had done together. They were younger, freer, laughing between takes. And suddenly, it was too much. The dam broke. He decided that if the world was going to remember him for something, it should be for the truth. When he said her name on camera, he wasn't confessing a sin, he was acknowledging a life he had hidden behind closed doors. I didn't hide her because I was ashamed. But later in a written interview, I hid her because the world doesn't forgive people like us for being human. Those words spread faster than any headline. Expected scandal, but instead, they found heartbreak. Fans who had adored his dramas now saw him not as a distant star, but as someone painfully real. Tags turned soft, full of empathy rather than outrage. Hell loved her too quietly trended for days. In a rare moment of unity, even the media hesitated to sensationalize it. The story was too tender, too fragile to be twisted. One columnist wrote, "Confessed to shock the world. He confessed to survive it. Meanwhile, Kim Yoo-jung stayed silent. She didn't post, didn't deny, didn't explain. Silence was dignified, almost poetic. Those who knew her said she understood, that perhaps she had always understood. A week later, unrelated press conference. Someone asked her about Song Kang. She paused, smiled softly. Said only, sometimes. The truth doesn't need words. It just needs time. That single sentence was enough. People began to see the story differently. It wasn't about a forbidden relationship. It was about two people caught between love and expectation. Trying to protect each other in the only way they knew how, through silence. Behind the scenes, friends revealed that the pressure had been immense. Both actors had faced years of scrutiny. Highly constructed images they had to maintain. Song Kang's agency had built him as the perfect son, the flawless man. And Kim Yoo-jung as the nation's sweetheart. There was no room for imperfection. No room for a private heart. They were living portraits. Painted by other people's expectations. But even perfection cracks. And when it did, it revealed something raw and real. Two people who had loved in a world that forbade them to. After the confession, Song Kang disappeared from the public eye. No social media. No events, no interviews. Some said he went abroad. Others said he was in the countryside. Staying with family. Wherever he was, he stayed quiet. But those close to him said he had found peace, not happiness, not yet. But something gentler. Spent his days away from the cameras. Learning to live as himself again. He still watched her dramas, they said. Smiled when he saw her on screen. He didn't reach out, not because he didn't want to. But because he finally understood that love didn't always need to be claimed. Sometimes it just needed to be remembered. Months passed. The world moved on, as it always does. But the confession lingered, in quiet hearts. Late night discussions. In the small moments when someone would say, I get it now. I understand him. When he finally reappeared months later. A small photo taken by a fan. He wasn't at an event, just walking down a quiet street in Seoul, hands in pockets. Wearing a simple black cap. No entourage. No cameras. Just a man who had learned the cost of truth. He looked different, softer somehow. Like someone who had stopped running. And maybe that was the point. He had spent years hiding what he loved most. Years living under lights too harsh for real emotion. But that night, when he finally spoke, he reclaimed something the industry had long taken from him, his humanity. He hit her not because he didn't love her. One journalist wrote. He hit her because he loved her too much to let the world break her. And in the end, the truth did break everyone, the fans, the press, even her. But it also broke the silence that had trapped him for so long. Now, when people speak of Song Kang, they don't talk only about his roles or his beauty. Talk about the night he cried in front of millions and made them see that stars can bleed too. That love, even when hidden, leaves a mark that never fades. In a world where image means everything, his confession reminded people of something rare, honesty. Not the kind polished for press releases, but the trembling, messy kind that costs you everything and gives you your soul back in return. And somewhere, maybe far from the noise, Kim Yoo-jung might have smiled, a quiet, knowing smile meant only for him. Because she would know, better than anyone, that it wasn't just a confession. It was a goodbye. He once said, if I ever say her name in public, I'm ready to lose everything. And he did. But in losing everything, he found himself again. The world remembers the tears, the silence, heartbreak, but what lingers longer is the grace in his honesty. Because in the end, he didn't cry for pity. Cried for love, the kind that survives even after the lights fade, the cameras stop, and the world forgets. He cried because for the first time, he was finally free.